Well, you must be here to learn how you can go from a beginner to a pro. So as a beginner, you're probably dying all the time, you're not making much money, and it also probably seems hard to keep moving forward. Well, in this video, I'm going to be showing you all the tips and tricks that I've learned over the few years I've been playing Phasmophobia. And hopefully with all these tips, you'll become a pro and be very safe and you'll be making all that dough. But before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, like the video, or even dislike it if you don't like it. But please comment down below why you disliked it, because I would really appreciate the feedback and I would like to get better at it. Also, all these tips have different intensities or something, so I put them in different categories. I put one in amateur, intermediate, and professional, which means this is also very good for even professional players, because some of these tips might actually be very helpful for you. But anyways, I hope you enjoy the video and let's begin. Alright, starting off in the amateur category, you can see it right above me. I have about 19 tips in here, which all have, some of them have subcategories. Sorry if I'm looking down a lot, I have my giant notepad right in front of me. But anyways, let's start with the first tip. So this tip is probably going to be one of the more basic ones, but as a beginner you probably don't know any of these. But for the first tip, you need to know how to get evidence. So do the tutorial. That will help you learn how to use all your equipment. Now I actually recently went through it and I actually didn't see anything about secondary equipment like smudge sticks or crucifixes, or even tripods or sound sensors. So you can either read the item descriptions in the shop format, or just play around with it and learn as you go. And I might also make a video on how to use all of the Phasmophobia equipment. So if you want me to make a video, then let me know down in the comments. Alright, but on to the next tip. Be smart with what you bring into contracts. So what I'm saying is don't just add everything to the truck and then just take everything in. Because if you die a lot, then you're just gonna lose a lot more money. So I'd say only bring in an extra dots, an extra writing, and then one of probably each of the other items. And then two crucifixes, all the smudge sticks, all the safety stuff is very nice, but you don't need to take everything because that's just a waste of money, especially if you die a lot. All right, next tip. This is one that's been very helpful to know, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but you can actually touch the button. You know, the button that you touch to open the van door, you can actually touch it again to open it again once you've closed it to end the contract. So say for example, you're trying to go for a perfect game, but you missed one of the objectives. Oh no, just click the button again and it'll open the door right up. Alright, tip number 4 is turn on lights to keep your sanity from draining. Just not too many lights or the breaker will pop, but you want to be afraid of the dark. Because if you're actually in light, you want to turn the main light on. That actually halts all sanity drain, which is very, very helpful. And it's also way more safe for you to be in light as well. But if you want the ghost to be a little bit more active, you can also be in the dark, and that'll actually make the ghost just slightly more active. That's actually a little fun fact right there. Alright, tip number 5. The best way to find the ghost room is to turn on the breaker on so you can let all the temperatures go up, because wherever the ghost is, it's going to be the coldest. So after that, you can just bring your thermometer and just walk around the rooms. Also try and look to see if maybe the cup was thrown, or maybe a book got thrown off a shelf or something. And also look out for the cold breath that comes out of your player, because that also probably means that that's the ghost room right there. Alright, this one I added an extra note. The ghost room will usually be the coldest room in the house, but the ghost is not actually locked to that room. They can also wander around the house as well. So if you see one room that's around 10 degrees, but then you see another room that's 5 degrees, the 5-degree room is definitely the ghost room. You want to find the coldest room. Alright, here's a really good tip, is learn how to hide by knowing what hiding spots to go to. Or you can also hide by hiding behind furniture as well. Now what do I mean by hide by knowing what hiding spots to go to? Well, just check your hiding spots, because especially in amateur mode, you have all hiding spots. But if you're trying to go for intermediate or professional, there might be some blocked hiding spots. So when you begin your contract, you can go and turn the breaker on, and while you're waiting for the temperatures to go up, you can actually just walk around and check the closets, make sure they're actually unblocked. So in case you actually hear a ghost hunting next to you, you can immediately run straight toward the hiding spots. And if you're not in a room with a hiding spot, but you're in a room like a kitchen, for example, behind a kitchen counter, just crouch down so you're below the kitchen counter, because that actually blocks line of sight. In which, when the ghost sees you, it'll actually start speeding up much faster. Most ghosts actually speed up, by the way. Also, one more thing is, if you're hiding in closets and lockers, make sure to hold the door closed. I have seen some people just close it and just leave it by itself. But if the ghost were to walk right next to that locker or closet, it'll just smack it open by itself. Okay? I've had many times where the ghost will just walk by my locker and I hold it, and then it's opening the locker next to mine. So make sure to do that, because that's how it's been forever since the game came out. You have to hold the door closed to be safe. Alright, and talking about line of sight, remember that 90% of the ghosts, basically almost all the ghosts, can actually speed up with line of sight. Line of sight obviously meaning that they can actually see you with their own eyes. So even if the ghost sounds fast, you might think it's a Hantu or one of the fast ghosts, just remember, just try and think about it. Was it speeding up because it was seeing me the whole time, or was it fast to begin with? So just keep that in mind. Alright, this next tip is actually very, very helpful to know, because sometimes it can confuse you. Alright, so it's good to know that the hunting sound will always be the same for every hunt for that contract, which means if it's like singing during that hunt and it's like keep singing, like you might think maybe that's a banshee, because like for banshees they're more likely to sing and do like singing ghost events. But that actually just means nothing, because the ghost will just randomly choose like any like hunting sound for that contract. So it could be like crying for like every single hunt, or it could be laughing or like heavy breathing or whatever, but it'll be that same exact sound for every single hunt. And this is also kind of nice because you can also use this to determine whether you're dealing with a ghost event or a hunt, because the ghost events actually use like many different sounds. Like some will be crying, some will be laughing, or some will also be like air balls. Like you see the airball mist that come to you and it does like the hiss sound. And then obviously some ghost events can do that hunting sound as well, so keep that in mind. But the best thing is, if you don't know if it's a hunt or an event, just run and hide. Because if you think it's an event but it turns out it's a hunt, then you're pretty much dead. So just always be cautious. Alright, tip number 9. This is also something that you probably figure out like as you play Phasmophobia, but some of you may or may not have realized when a hunt is happening, you actually cannot turn on or off lights until the hunt finishes. Now this has always been a thing since Phasmophobia ever came out, but this is a really good way to know if a ghost is hunting or not, because if you physically just cannot like turn on or off a light, then that means it's hunting and you better be careful. Now keep in mind, some ghost events, I don't know why it's only some, but they also keep you from turning on the light until they finish the ghost event. Now that might be for like the ghost events like break the lights or something, so just watch out for that and so you can determine whether to hunt or not. Alright, tip number 10, halfway there through the amateur tips, is the less you get touched by ghost events, the more sanity you have and the safer you are. Now all ghost events don't have to take all your sanity, it's only when you actually touch the ghost, or the ghost touches you. That's when you actually lose some sanity. Now most ghosts will take 10% sanity per ghost event, but Onis take 20%, and then Banshees take 15% when they do singing ghost events. Alright, tip number 11. Don't immediately go for harder modes or difficulties when you unlock them. You may not be ready for it. What I would recommend is just try to get better consistent contracts with perfect games and just make the most of the contracts. Like if you're missing like some objectives, try to go for that objective if you can. Or maybe you're missing the bone, so like walk around the house and try to find the bone. Alright, speaking of perfect games can make you a lot more money and a lot more experience. And I would recommend just try to go for perfect games all the time, because it also gets you used to like what you can take pictures of and what you can't take pictures of. And it also kind of helps you learn with the door pictures as well, because whenever you take pictures of the doors, it would actually be the fingerprint placement of where there would normally be fingerprints. Some are like near the handle, some are on the top of the door, or some are even in the middle of the door. So this just helps you learn about that. And on a side note, use the EMF to figure out what exactly the ghost touched, because sometimes it may sound like it touched the door next to you, but it actually touched the door like, I don't know, 2 doors further than that. So using the EMF can help a ton with figuring out what to take a picture of. Sometimes the EMF could be useful for finding the ghost at the start of a contract, because sometimes you'll hear something but you're not sure about like where the sound came from. If you take your EMF, you can actually like pinpoint where exactly that was. Alright, here's one that I see people do all the time. So, to prevent this, always make sure to double check that you selected the right ghost. Because picture this, you've gotten all the photos, you got all objective, you picked up the bone, you figured out the ghost, and you click the button to leave, but you forgot to select the ghost. Maybe you were too excited to see like how many levels you got or like how much money you made. But this is something that everyone should do, is just double check before you leave. Double check that you selected the right ghost, so you can prevent those perfect games from being ruined. Alright, here's a tip that I probably should have had earlier. But the ghost can hear you and your equipment, whether it's powered on in your hand or if you're talking. So just be careful. Just if you're holding like a flashlight or something, just drop it or turn it off, because once you shut it off, the ghost will just check that last location that knew where you were, so that if you just stay out of sight, it will not actually find you. Now sometimes ghosts can roam exactly to where you were, so you just gotta learn like how to stay safe basically. But yeah, once you shut off your equipment, just try and stay out of sight and hide when you can, or you can just hope that the ghost does not find you. Alright, next tip. Do not trust every description in the journal. Most of it is just flavor text. Like seriously, most of it is probably just flavor text. It does not mean the actual thing. Like for example, the Wraith. Wraiths are afraid of salt and will actively avoid it. They do not actively avoid it. That just means that they will just never step in it. Or demons, here's a good one. Demons fear the crucifix and will be less aggressive near one. That does not mean anything. They do fear the crucifix, so the crucifix are actually 50% bigger for demons, but they will not be less aggressive near one. That just means that the crucifix will catch them much more often, but they're definitely not less aggressive, I will say that. Or the Uris have been known to have a stronger effect on people's sanity. That pretty much just never happens unless it does like an ability, which you should pretty much see right away to know if it's a Uri. So yeah, do not trust the journal descriptions, they are not all true. Our next tip, never cross off evidence unless you're sure that you've tested that specific evidence a few times. It could also be possible that you're in the wrong room, going back to the thermometer tip. Or sometimes it might just be a while until the evidence shows up. like freezing or dots or writing, even spirit box, because you got to make sure the ghost is actually in the room with you. Because remember, ghosts can wander out of the room. All right, next tip. Just because the ghost threw an item in a certain room does not make that the ghost room. It may have like wandered around and then thrown an item, or it might be following you around as well. Like maybe it's like a banshee following you around or something. But yes, that does not mean that is its ghost room, but it could mean that it is near there, so check around the rooms. All right, here's a good one. Cold breath does not mean freezing. Now, whenever Phasmophobia came out, and then 2 years later, that was the case. But whenever they did the whole like level revamp and then all the tiered equipment, that was no longer the case. Cold breath just means that it's a little bit colder there. It's under 5 degrees. But freezing is actually under 1 degree. At least for Celsius. I'm not sure what it is for Fahrenheit. So yeah, cold breath is a good way to find the ghost room, but it's only good as long as the breaker is on. And you gotta make sure it's not cold just from like snowing, because snow weather actually makes it much more colder too with the breaker off. So you basically have breath everywhere. All right, next tip is for the spirit box. So you only need to turn off the room lights to get the spirit box to work. Your equipment like flashlights, like any dots or anything, does not matter at all. That is like useless. It's only the light in the room. So just make sure it's completely dark. Lamps off. The main light off. And then you'll be able to get spirit box from that. Also, when you're playing in a team, it's best to have only one person asking for the spirit box and no one else in the room, because sometimes the ghost prefers to respond to everyone or only one person. So that's just always like a good test, especially when you're playing with other people. All right, and then last tip in this adventure category is airballs or mist ghost events mean that it cannot be an Oni. Now, I don't know why, but the developer said that that is the case. But you definitely got to keep in mind that Onis can use the same exact hiss with other ghost events, just not airballs. Because it's not about the hiss, it's about the visual airball like coming at you. That is what means it's not an Oni. Alright, so the amateur category did take a bit more time, but this should be pretty much about half the time because I only have about 10 tips. But they also might be a little bit more complex. So I hope you enjoy them. But tip number 1 is if you run into a ghost that's hard to figure out or won't give you the less evidence, well, don't be a baby. I know it might sound like a little harsh or something, but it's pretty gratifying whenever you push forward and you like figure out the ghost, whether it's by evidence or behavior. You can even stop and look, like, what ghost do I have left? Oh, I've got an Obake or a Raichu. Like maybe you have orbs and EMF, but you can't figure out the last evidence. Maybe like see what the difference is between those ghosts, whether you're looking in the journal or looking online. Because you could even like cause a cursed hunt and then just hide somewhere and like listen to the speed of the ghost. So maybe it's fast, and that means it could only be like one ghost in the journal. So boom, easy. Like it really is just not that hard to actually figure out ghosts. You just got to make sure and push forward and persevere, because it actually is very fun and like satisfying being able to figure out ghosts like that. All right, here's a good tip: is learn what ghosts have forced evidence. By forced evidence, I mean that you will always get like a certain type of evidence with certain ghosts. Now, it does have to be like at least one evidence. You cannot get this forced evidence on no evidence, for example. But if it's one evidence, all these specific ghosts will always have the same evidence. It's like the Moray and Diogen, they always have spirit box. You got the Goryo, it'll always have dots, which is invisible unless you see in the camera. You got the Obake, they'll always have UV fingerprints. You got the Hantu, that will always have freezing. And the last one is a bit special. You got the Mimic. Now, Mimic always has orbs, no matter what. But the difference is, they also have orbs during no evidence, because orbs are actually not an evidence for the Mimic. It's actually its ability. So keep that in mind. But yeah, that's what forced evidence is. So if you're playing on Insanity mode, for example, and you only have one evidence, you get Spirit Box. I would say it's a higher likely that you get a Moray or a Diogen, because that's always forced for them. Alright, tip number 3 is learn the difference between a ghost hunt and a ghost event. Alright, here's how you can tell. A ghost event will be loud and immediate. Once it starts its ghost event, it'll like close all the doors in the room, shut the light off right away, and when you see the ghost, it will never blink, because that's just a ghost event. And the ghost can be like a stealth, like almost invisible, and also a shadow model, which ghost hunts actually cannot use that model. Alright, then ghost hunts will actually be much more quieter. But pretty much it'll start, it'll do its grace period, you will probably hear the front door lock, which is also a really good indication that it is indeed hunting. And after the grace period, it'll then start to walk, and then you'll also see it blinking, which means it's hunting, and you need to hide. And as I said before, hunting ghosts cannot use the shadow model. It'll always be the full form ghost model. So you'll always be able to see it, of course, but they'll also be blinking. Alright, here's a really good tip. Number 4. So the best way to get the spirit box is to wait for a ghost event. You can either walk right on top of it or wait for it to leave and then walk to it. Because ghost events actually teleport the ghost to that location, or like that's their actual location right there. Which means it's also very good for spirit box, because you can walk right on top of the ghost and then ask the questions. So that if you get an answer, that's spirit box. And if you don't, then you can probably know for certain you're probably not going to get spirit box. It's also kind of nice too, because ghost events usually shut off lights right away anyways, so it's perfect. And of course, you could also like ask questions around like where things are getting thrown. Like maybe you got like a cup thrown in like a corner of a room, so you can just walk to that corner and ask some questions as well. But it's not quite as guaranteed. Our next tip is a bit of information that you should know. Is ghosts will wander around and always be moving. They're never going to be in the same spot all the time. Sometimes they might stop in like a certain spot and then like keep moving after that. But that also means they will never stay in the ghost room because ghosts are always roaming around. And you've also got to be careful when you're in hunting range, which is normally around 50% sanity, but obviously some ghosts can hunt above that, some ghosts can hunt below that. But you got to keep in mind, the ghost could walk outside of the room, like if you have a crucifix in there, it can just walk outside and then hunt from there. And this also kind of connects to the next tip. You want to use crucifixes as a path or like a safe area in case the ghost decides to hunt elsewhere. So the best example that I have would be like if you're in the basement, place one near the stairs because the ghost could probably hunt right on top of the stairs. And then you'd be pretty much dead unless you have a hiding spot down there. Because if a room is too big for crucifixes to cover the whole thing, at least cover your safe areas. Like you can have like one spot near the stairs, so then if it starts to hunt on the opposite side of the room, then you can just run up the stairs and hide. Alright, and once you've gotten a ghost to hunt, maybe go to the truck and check your sanity, because you never know, it could have been like an early hunt, and maybe you're above 50% sanity, which would rule out most of the ghosts, like probably 80% of them. Alright, tip number 8 is one of the really useful tips, is if you have ghost orbs as one of your evidence, that means that whatever room that the ghost orb is in, that means that's the ghost room. And orbs will always be where the ghost room is, even if the ghost room moves. If it moves like from the foyer to a kitchen, you'll be able to check with the video camera. If you see orbs in a new spot, that's the new ghost room. And here's more information about other evidence that's kind of similar to the ghost orbs, but not really. But if the ghost throws a writing book, that means it cannot be writing. Unless it's hiding evidence on Nightmare and Insanity, then you can't really rule it out. Which obviously, if you're on Nightmare and Insanity, you really don't want to like keep anything ruled out, because obviously it could just be hiding the evidence. Alright, then last part of this tip is salt is also a very good way to get UV evidence. Because if the ghost has UV at all, it'll always show it. Even the Obake. The Obake cannot hide every single footprint. Now I think it has a 25% chance to not show a footprint for every footprint, but it still cannot hide every footprint. Alright, tip number 9 is all lights get shut off whenever a ghost stops hunting, or when it also uses its crucifix. So that's also another good way to tell if it stops hunting, or if it tried to hunt, but shut every light off in the process. Alright, and then last tip for the intermediate category is number 10. If the ghost turns on a computer via the keyboard, or maybe a TV via the remote, it can still be a mare. Now it used to mean that it was not a mare, but then apparently that was a bug and they like fixed it, so that is no longer the case. And mares can turn on computers and TVs. I also wanted to point this out, but why is the icon a light bulb icon? I know for the computer it's for sure a light bulb icon, but that should not be the case, because obviously the mare can turn that on, but mares cannot turn on lights. So I'm sure many people would like see that and think, oh, maybe that means that's a light and that's not a mare then. But no, that's definitely not the case. Alright, then lastly we got the professional category. So I also put together 10 tips for this. Now it took me a little more time to actually figure out what to put on here, but hopefully it'll help you push the boundary between like intermediate and professional, helping you like be way more successful at the game. Alright, so tip number 1 is audio is very helpful, whether you're testing for ghosts or listening for different speeds, or when you're crouched behind a counter in the dark trying to stay alive. Because sometimes you may have to loop a ghost and shut the light off right before it starts to hunt, and then you just cannot see. But then you also don't want to turn your flashlight on because it may be like a fast ghost or something, so you're just trying to survive. And then kind of going on to the next tip is using headphones is a game changer. If you're not using headphones and you're using like speakers or something, definitely use headphones, because these help a ton. It helps you to know exactly where sound comes from, whether it's behind you, in front of you, to the left or right, or even like a specific direction diagonally. But going back to that dark example, it can especially help you trying to survive against like a hunting ghost in the dark, because you can listen where the footsteps are, and it definitely helps a lot. Alright, tip number 3, start playing on nightmare mode, because it almost forces you to use your like ghost knowledge, because obviously you're not going to get all 3 evidence, so it kind of forces you to use your mind and start thinking about other ghost behavior and like certain mechanics, and it kind of forces you to like learn and like have a little bit more fun with it. And this is also a plus that you can also rule out ghosts with forced evidence. Like maybe you get EMF and ghost orbs, and there are only 2 options, Raichu or Obake. Well, obviously Obake has forced fingerprints, and you did not get fingerprints, so obviously that means it has to be a Raichu. Now that's a really good combination that you probably won't get with most ghosts, but when you do, it's like much more easier to figure out. Alright, tip number 4, save sprint in case you need it. Especially if you're playing with lower grace periods, like 0 second to 2 second grace periods, because it can definitely save you in a pickle. Like think about this, maybe you just walk inside the map and the ghost decides to hunt right in front of you, but you just used all your sprint to get to the house. Well, you're dead. So maybe instead of doing it that way, walk to the house, make sure you have sprint, and then walk in. Especially if your sanity is low and you think you might get hunted soon. I've had many ghosts spawn right on top of me and kill me, especially in 1 second grace periods. And some of those times I actually had no sprint, so I just could not escape. So definitely save sprint, that definitely helps a lot. Alright, halfway there with tip number 5 is the best way to get out of sight in hunts. Maybe sometimes you cannot, but the best way to get out of sight is by cutting corners and crouching behind furniture. Now you can pretty much just hide behind all kitchen counters, Now some tables and couches do work as well, but you gotta like test that and make sure for yourself. But cutting corners is a big thing because the ghost will always just check the last location that saw you, and then sometimes it just turns right around and just like loses you completely. So just cut corners. Also, adding to this tip, make sure and close doors behind you too, because that will also help to block line of sight as well. And with the recent door change, they made it to where you can't like just like phase right through a door. You can actually like help like boost yourself forward a little bit too. I've actually had a lot of fun doing that. And also, you make it cornered into a room with like only like there's like a couch in the center and that's it. You can just loop the ghost around it. Now most couches and counters you can't really loop around forever, but if you crouch down like around a kitchen counter for example and keep your light on, you'll be staying out of sight while also keeping the ghost on you, so the ghost will not be speeding up. You can also just like sprint away if you need some space or anything, but that's also a very easy loop to do. Alright, tip number 7. This is something that I feel like all pros do, is always keep in mind what your sanity might be. Because maybe you go to the truck and it looks off, like, oh, I've got 30% sanity, but I should have been around 50% sanity. Well, then like go back and think, maybe you got hit by a ghost vent and maybe it's like an Oni or something, because Onis take 20% sanity. Or it could have been an ability like the Yurei ability where it double touches the door and closes it completely, because that also takes sanity as well. Or maybe the Jinn ability with the breaker, it can also take like 25% sanity as well. Yeah, keep in mind what your sanity might be, because that can also help you like figure out what ghosts it could be. Especially if you're down to like a few certain ghosts and like you know for certain like these other ghosts could not have done this. Only one could do this. Alright, then talking about abilities, always be watching for ghost abilities. Whether it be like when it hunts early, or it's just like acting weird for some reason, like you're on the far side of the house, but like the ghost is like doing some stuff there. So maybe like teleported a room to you or something. Because like watching for abilities can also help when you're not really finding much evidence. You kind of just gotta go off of like behaviors and mechanics and like what are you seeing? And also like what are you hearing? Alright, tip number 9, being able to figure out ghosts with no evidence and only like using secondary evidence like salt, candles, smudge sticks, crucifixes, paramics is very helpful knowledge to have. Now I'm not going to talk about every single thing because this video would be way more longer, but I do have a no evidence series where I try to go through a couple runs each episode on different maps. I explain what I think about the ghosts and like what I'm seeing, and then like all the different tests I'm doing to figure out like how to rule out different ghosts. Because the main thing I want for that series is like to show you guys how you can solve no evidence as well. So feel free to click up there if you want to see it. Tip number 10 is play with other people, whether it be friends or like anyone that you find online. Maybe join a Phasmophobia Discord or a group on Facebook or something, or just figure out how to have fun, because none of this matters if you're not having fun. Just learn how to have fun and learn to always be learning and moving forward. Like challenge yourselves, maybe do like different challenges. Do the weekly challenge, because that's always fun too, especially if there's like certain weekly challenges that aren't really like that good at making money, because you could easily like do like the same thing with custom mode but make way more money. But just do it for fun. Why not? Make a video on it like I try to do every week. But yeah, last tip I would say is have fun. Alright, well I hope this really helped you guys. I'm not sure how well this video is going to do. In my mind I thought it was going to do really well, but as I've went through all these tips and talked about them, I honestly have no idea how it's going to do. But anyways, feel free to subscribe, like the video, comment down below what you learned and what other like things you've seen as well with Phasmophobia. Also join my Discord. I have a community and I've actually like kind of revamped the whole Discord too. I've added a bot and made the whole like place look like much better too. I think it looked like really bland before, but it looks much better now. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, great night, great afternoon. Anyways, happy ghost hunting. Bye bye.